yourself talking and wow, I sound like that? Like you can't believe it. You're kids. They say that you do sound like that. So I want to talk today about a couple of things. One, I want to talk about the main takeaway is going to be not to compare yourself with others in life. Right? That's something we all do sometimes is compare ourselves with others in life. And we're at the end of the month of Adar. And the month of Adar, we said, when Adar comes, that it's a very, very happy time. And the answer is, why is it so happy? People might say, well, the holiday of Purim is here. So it's a happy time, holiday of Purim, you dance around, you eat Pomentashen. I'll tell you, look, if you want holidays, right, go to September. Because in September, I work at Merrill Lynch, and I have a new boss now. My old boss moved to California, to Silicon Valley, and they brought in a guy named, my favorite name to the business, Chandler Root. Chandler Root. That's his name, Chandler Root. So he had a get-to-know-you meeting with all the guys in the office, and he had 5 or 6 people at a time. And for the Orthodox guys, he says, you know what, we'll have a meeting, we'll bring in kosher food, and we'll get to know each other a bit. So a couple of weeks ago, we brought in kosher food, and we're schmoozing, and he's asking, so I know you guys, you pray in the morning, and there's a lot of holidays in September. The rest of the world takes vacation August 15th till September 1st. If you're Orthodox, August 15th till October 1st, right? The whole month is off. And he said, Kurt, I've been, he said, to a Shiva house. He's paid respects when someone's relative has passed away a number of times, but he's never been to a holiday. And he wanted to come to the next holiday that he could come to. So I said, you know what, coming up is the holiday of Purim. It's a Sunday this year. Why don't you stop by? You're commuting back and forth anyway. You come for 2 hours on a Sunday. You'll get to see what Purim's like. He says, I'm in. I didn't tell him what Purim was about. So he comes to my house 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like, this is great. There's a guy dressed as Spider-Man. One of the other teachers dressed as Spider-Man, all in blue, right? Another fellow dressed as Winnie the Pooh with a huge Winnie the Pooh thing on. Everybody is half drunk. There's boys up and down the street, 16 years old, dancing with like a drum or a trombone. And he's like, your rabbis condone this behavior? This has dispensation from your religious leaders? I said, not only that, Chandler, this is the holiest day of the year. He says, I'm in. When do I convert? I said, no. Before you convert, you got to come back for Tisha B'Av. You want to convert then. He said, what's that? And we'll talk about that in August. So he's going to come back in August. But it can't be that the reason why Adar is so happy is because of Purim. It's not the reason why. I want to say this. The reason. Well, I want to go back a week before Purim to talk about Parshas Zachar and what a Amalek is. Because I think the big part of Adar that's so powerful, that's so happy, is the simcha, the joy in squashing out Amalek. So what does that mean? So you have the mitzvah in the Torah the week before Purim to go to shul, and everyone's got to be there. The rabbis take it very seriously. They have an early minyan, you go to the early minyan, it's packed. There's a later minyan, that's also packed. They even have a later reading for people who don't make the first 2 minyans. The shul is packed all day long to hear Parshas Zachar. Here's what Parshas Zachar said. These 50 words are crucially important to God. Remember what Amalek did to you when you left Egypt. You were exiled from Egypt. You left Egypt. He happened upon you upon the way. And of the people who were leaving Egypt, there were people in the back who were very tired. He killed those people when you were exhausted and faint from work. He didn't fear God. And it will be when God gives you rest from all the people around you, gives you the land of Israel, and you rest in the land of Israel, and all the enemies are gone. Still, you have to remember, wipe out the memory of Amalek, this nation that attacked us. Don't forget. And they say the last line, again, real slowly. You can kill, cries, quiet. Remember, wipe out the memory of Amalek. Don't forget. Say it 2 times, then 40 words are done. You go home. That's it. What is so important about that? And it's funny because if you want to forget, the only people in the whole world who remember Amalek is us. If you ask a non-Jewish person to talk about characters in the Torah, they will tell you there's an Abraham in the Torah, there's an Isaac, there's a King David, King Solomon. That people know. But ask Amalek, no one knows what it is but us. And yet we're commanded to squash him out. It's like a big problem. We know what remembers him but us. We're commanded to squash him out, not so we don't forget him, but we can't forget him. It's like it's catch-22. And by the way, who is Amalek, right? I always think Amalek is someone who's got an agenda against the Jewish people, right? So we said the Nazis, maybe they were Amalek, and we said that the Iranians now are Amalek. I live in Passaic. It was an live in Passaic. You're all welcome to come for Pesach. So in Passaic, all the men go to shul between 6 and 7 in the morning, right? So 6 and 7 in the morning, there's 1,500 families, 100 cars get out of the driveway, go to shul. That's the time you go to shul. 2 weeks ago, a cop pulls me over at like 6:10 in the morning. And I'm thinking, doesn't this guy know, like we all live in town, where does he think I'm going? What's the big deal? So he pulls me over, and I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? He walks to the car, license registration, please. I'm like, it's like 6:10 in the morning, you know who I am, I pay your salary, we're all in this together, I live a block away. Like, what's going on? Doesn't break a smile. License and registration, please. Now! I was like, okay, you know what I'm saying? Like, takes his good old time, comes back 10 minutes later. What happened? My trunk was up. Why was my trunk up? The night before I'm driving, I have one of those things that stops the glare from the cars behind you. So you got to push the button to put it down. I pushed the wrong button. My trunk popped open. I didn't know it. You could have hey, knocked on my door. That's it. So I say, that's a malik, right? But no one really knows who this nation is. What are they doing to us? What's he doing, right? Was he crazy? So what is it? So what is really, a malik is something that we have deep inside us, that only comes out once in a while, that we have to work hard to squash, right? Work hard to squash. So when I say, look at this, I say it's an internal part of us. It's the bad habits we've had, for my case, 46 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. It's a small virus that you really don't pay attention to, but every once in a while, it gets you. It doesn't let you be great. It doesn't let you achieve. It doesn't let you do terrific things with your life. That's what you have to squash out. And why does God make us remember that? Because if you don't remember it, it's very, very easy to forget that that's a big part of what's holding all of us back. And once a year, God says, you know what? That virus that's inside you, that thing that attacks you when you're weak and on the way, that it pretends says that Amalek just attacked us by happenstance. We happened to be leaving Egypt, and they happened to be with bows and arrows on the mountain, and we came by, and they attacked us. It just happened that way, right? That's what Amalek is. So I want to talk about one thing that I think that affects all of us, and that is not listening to our own messages and comparing ourselves too much to others, right? Not listening to the messages that we get in life and comparing ourselves too much to others. So, why was I thinking about this? Because this Malaysian flight, we now know, what happened. The guy crashed into the sea. But the first 4 or 5 days that it was gone, people didn't know what was happening. So what was the response of the Israelis? It was very interesting. The Israeli response was, the plane was hijacked. Someone was probably going to put nuclear weapons on it and fly it over Israel. So their defense, they raised their Air Force defense to like code red, whatever code red is, and they made sure any approaching commercial airliner from much further away now that's flying in, they're going to make sure that plane identifies itself way ahead of time and and guard it in with the Air Force to make sure there's no attack. Now nothing happened, right? We know something happened in the plane now, but it hit me that we're supposed to think whenever something happens in the world, what's the message for us? How does it affect us? I don't know any other nation in the world, not Russia, not the US, not France, not Germany, that thought, oh my goodness, there's this, happened to be a crazy or deranged pilot that took his own life and killed other people, that thought, no, maybe we have to be careful, it's a message to us. And I remember when the tsunami hit, was it 5, 6 years ago now, so they asked a great rabbi in Israel, the tsunami, what is the message to us, the Jewish people, about an earthquake and a tidal wave on the other side of the world that killed 100,000 people, left decimation in its wake? What's the message to us personally? So he said something very beautiful. He said it's lashon hara, it's gossip. How does he think about that? Because what happened with the tsunami was deep in the ocean, there was an earthquake. No one felt the earthquake. And then this water kept on going and going and going, and all of a sudden, 6,000 miles away, kaboom, it destroyed hundreds of thousands of lives. He said, so too, when you make a comment to someone at a cocktail party in New York City, maybe an engagement in Los Angeles breaks up, or someone doesn't do business with someone else because it was a cruel comment, or a comment you didn't think about before you said it. So that's how you think that everything in the world is a way for you to grow from, right? Everything has got something for us to grow from. That's what I felt the plane was. When you're Jewish, everything out there is a message, right? With Israel, the whole world's, I don't know what Israel 20 years ago they said to one of our classes, they said, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Right? It's nothing even though you're paranoid. They're still out to get you. Israel, they're out to get you. Are they paranoid? Maybe, but people are out to get them. Well, you have to think what your messages are. I want to tell you a beautiful measures, right? A beautiful measures now about a person who's listening to her own messages and not comparing herself to others. So it says that there's a story about a great rabbi, Rashi ben Chalafta, that one Erev Shabbos he came to his house and he had zero money. Right? He's in New York City. It's 2007. The real estate market crashes. The stock market crashes. He's got no money. And Shabbos comes and he's got no food for Shabbos. So what does he do? He goes outside the city. He goes to Central Park. And he goes to the woods in Central Park and he starts praying to God. God, please send me something. I got no money, nothing. I'm broke. There's no food for Shabbos. And what happens? And lo and behold, God answers him. He looks down, says there's an Evan Tova. There's a pearl or a diamond at his foot. Can't believe it. Picks up the diamond, right? Runs to the bank. Looks, this is a real diamond, 25 carat, a yellow diamond, a fancy yellow diamond right there. He gives it to the bank teller, and he puts it in his safe deposit box, and takes out $500 for Shabbos. Oh, and he goes to Zabar's, and he buys whatever he can. Or he buys the 5 types of challah, and the garlic challah, and the olive challah, and he buys the wines, and he buys the spices, and he buys the fish and the meat. And it's gorgeous. Your wife, he comes home, he sets the table, the candles are glowing, and there's wine there. And his wife comes in the house. She has no idea what happened. She thinks they're broke. She comes home, and she says to him, where did all this stuff come from? And he says to her, honestly, he says, God gave it to me. Now, she was a tough woman. She says, I'm not tasting a thing until you tell me exactly where you got it from. Don't tell me, God gave it to you. Your friend's in jail for 10 years for insider trading because God gave it to him too. Like, forget it. Where did the money come from? She was nobody's fool. He says, no, really. I went in Central Park and I prayed. And there's this pearl. Here's the receipt from the safe deposit box. It's ours. She says, no, I'm not going to taste a thing unless you promise me that you'll return it Saturday night to the person that gave it to you. To God, what does that mean? So he says, what? And she says, why are you saying this? She says back to him beautifully, she says, do you want it to be in the next world that your table, your world, your table is missing a leg and your friend's table is full? Is that what you want it to be in the next world? You're going to give up everything for this? So he thinks, why is she saying that? He prayed and God answered his prayers and they have food. Like, why is she pushing back so much? He says, you know what? I'm going to take you to my rabbi. Good answer, right? He takes her to his rabbi, and the rabbi tells him, tell your wife she's nuts. She's so worried about the next world. I'll pay your table for mine. I got a big table. I'm a holy rabbi. I'll pay your big table for my table, right? I'll do that. So, goes back home, I told rabbi what happened. I prayed to him. She says, take me to the person that taught you Torah. So they go see Rebbe together. And she says she's going to argue with his rabbi who said, take the money. It's a lottery ticket. You want $100 million. What's she fighting about? He says to her, look, he says this. It says a person goes to the next world to Oilamo, and that means his world. Olamim is plural. It says every person, next world, gets his own world. There's not one world we're all sharing. It's a person's world. She says, Rebbe, I want my husband to have his world, not anybody else's world. And so Rebbe says, you're right. Says, return it. Rebbe says he lost the argument. She was right and he was wrong. He says, go back and return it Saturday night. So they say that the miracle that happened Saturday night was greater than the first miracle. He went back to the safe deposit box, took out the pearl. I guess they kept the $500. Goes out to Central Park, takes the stone, throws it up in heaven, and it says a hand came down from heaven, Yard Malach, but not Tlahimenim. And a hand came and took it back. Right? So, what's going on with the story here? This is mentioned. What is she saying? So she's saying something beautiful about accepting who you are in the world and being happy with what you are and what you have. She was saying to him, she's saying, Rebbe, my husband, are we sad we have no money now? Are we sad we're poor? Sure we're sad, she said. Sure we're sad. But my husband is great, not in spite of his poverty, but because of his poverty. He's great, not because he's Not in spite of the fact that he's not great at work, or that the stock market crashed, or that he doesn't get along with his father-in-law or his boss, but because of those things. I married him because he is a great person with all his faults, and with eating at Meal Mart and having I don't eat Zabar's. I'm happy to have cheap cookies and milk. I don't eat fancy stuff. I want these things. It's like whenever you paint your house. You ever go to paint your house? They always sell you they want to put 4 colors of paint together. They have an off yellow paint. They call it seagull whatever, It's so certain color. Off yellow. And you paint your house off yellow. That's the only color that it's ever going to be. If you try to match that color with someone else's color later, it doesn't work. It doesn't fit. She's I don't want your table to go on my table. I don't want your leg on my leg. I'm happy with what we have here. I don't want to lose one bit of who we are. Not one bit, right? And so that's what she said. We don't care what someone else is. We don't need what another person has. We need what our messages are and what our life is and what our destiny is. That's what she's telling Rebbe. It's funny. So beautiful story. I think a very powerful story. But one thing as well is there's a rabbi I speak to. The powerful rabbi who is a very senior person, 90-year-old person, Rabbi Kamenetsky. So whenever I have a question, I'll go to him, right? And recently I had a question, I found something out, what should I say about it? And he could not advise me. He said, Kurt, I don't know how to advise you on this one. So I kept my mouth shut, I didn't do a thing. Because I felt, if he was going to tell me to do it, I would point to him in the next world, say, you know what, he told me to do it, you want to blame me, blame him. He's 90 years old. That's what you told me to go to, God, to the right rabbis. But he told me not to do it, I kept my mouth shut. I haven't said a word. Said, so too here, they went to a rabbi, but nevertheless he was bested because her story was more powerful. We all have to be that way, to accept what we have and not compare ourselves with anybody else and not what anybody else has. And I got a great story, Ben. That's a Torah story. I'll tell you a true story now. True story now about someone who, at the end of their life, was able to accept something very, very hard to accept. So I live in Passaic, New Jersey, as you know. And my wife's grandparents, or her step-grandparents, actually started Passaic, I want to say 50, 60 years ago, when the Jews, started moving out of Brooklyn, wherever, they came to Passaic. So they were one of the first families in Passaic in the 1950s and 60s. And so they know some of the old-timers. So one of the shuls we go to there was an old couple. I'm going to call them the Schwartzes. They're not the Schwartzes, but I'm going to call them the Schwartzes. And this is their story. So they came to America in the 40s after the war, after the Holocaust. They were both in Auschwitz. And they they lost most of their family in Auschwitz, and they came back to Newark, New Jersey after the war. So in Newark then, it was a very popular Jewish area. Dozens of shuls, lots of young Jewish families, everyone trying to rebuild after the Holocaust. So they come to Newark, and they had one relative here, and everyone was each other's family. Everybody went to the weddings, everybody went to the weddings, right? You had a kid, everybody came to the bris, because there was no family. So they watched all their friends grow and have children, and the Nazis had done a very good job on that. They could not have children, right? Very, very sad. So they stayed in Newark for 10 to 15 years, longer than everybody else. For Newark, we think Newark, New Jersey is like a yucca place. So back then, one of the high schools in Newark graduated more PhDs than any school in the entire country. It was like a high-end place then. There was a medical center they built there. So they left Newark, they came to Elizabeth, and then they moved to Passaic. And they went to this shul for many, many years. 30, 40 years they've been going to the shul. And my wife and I, they had a niece who lived in Passaic. My wife and I invited them many times for Shabbos, or for Pesach, or for Purim, but they wanted to go by themselves, or with their niece, fine. So last year, they said to us, fine, they'll come to us for a Seder, because their niece was out of town or something. So we said, great. So they say to us, can we bring anything? Now, what do you think? I'm 90 years old. You're going to come yourself, we're thrilled, don't bring anything. And my kids were all excited, and they made a king and a queen chair for them with special streamers and a pillow, and a king and a queen hat. It was very cute. So before Pesach, the day before Pesach, he knocks on the door, Mr. Schwartz, 90 years old. Now, I have a custom before Pesach, I measure my own matzah and lettuce for the matzah and maror, because I can't stand eating so much, and if you measure, it's a lot less. It takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours to measure it all. I got lettuce, my kids bring it over, I got a gram scale right there, we clean for Pesach, the whole thing. And I'm there measuring lettuce, And here comes Mr. Schwartz with a bottle of wine that looked like it came from the time of the Gemara. Right? He said, I want to give you wine for Pesach. So I stand up. Now, on one hand, I'm thrilled. It's a very nice gift. On the other hand, there's no kosher sign on it. It probably tastes like vinegar. So I say, thank you very much. And I put it, in the back of the closet. Fine. That night they come to the table. I'm in my kitzel. And my kids are around. My daughter says, Tati, what about the wine the Schwartzes brought? I was like, what about the wine the Schwartzes brought, right? Don't you know? So I go back to the closet and I said, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to make kiddush on my wine, and then I'm going to pour out a little bit of the Schwartzes wine to all the table. Fine. So I do that, pour the Schwartzes in a little bit of wine, everybody's happy. And then we finish this, get close to the end of the Seder. And my daughter says, how about taking their wine and using it for the kosher Elijah's cup? So because my daughter said that they had their own redemption. They were in Auschwitz, and they had their own redemption from Auschwitz. And Elijah's going to come and redeem all of us from our own personal redemptions. And wouldn't it be nice if the wine that they brought us for use for the redemption? Okay, good idea, fine. So I got a huge cup, whole thing's in wine. Now at this point, Mr. Schwartz perks up. He hadn't said anything the whole Seder. He played with the kids. He was very nice and gracious, but hadn't really said anything. He said, I think he should call me Rabbi one time, but Kurt, he said, I want to tell you where that bottle of wine came from. He said, when I got out of Auschwitz, I went back home. And I went back to my house, and there was nothing left. The Nazis took everything, every valuable, every furniture. The house was gone. I mean, the house was still there, but everything inside was gone. And the Poles said to me, we thought we killed all of you. You're still alive? So I went in the basement, and all I found left was a bottle of wine. And my father used to make wine before the war in Europe. And this is all I have from the memory of my father, is this bottle of wine. It's all I've left of him. He should rest in peace. He said it was my goal to take this wine to America and use it for the bris of my son and my son's wedding. He said, but God had other plans. We were not, and my wife and I we were always very bitter about why God saved us from Auschwitz, only to deny us the blessing of children in the new world when everybody else had a blessing like that. Everyone now is on the floor crying. Like, we're all comatose. We're on the floor. Kids are crying. I'm crying. The matzah's wet. Like, it's, stuff. We're all crying. And he says, I merited it to see the rebuilding of the Jewish people, which I never thought I'd be able to see. When I came to America, there was nothing in the 1940s. And now look around, your family and families here, says it's burgeoning. He says, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to your Seder and for using this bottle of wine. How much longer am I going to be in this world anyway? Have this wine sit in my house and gather dust makes no sense. I said, thank you very much. And he said, my wife and I are very happy to be here. And that was their story. And I said, too, it's a tremendous thing to do, to be able to look away and not compare yourself to someone else, and be happy and be a giver, and see the message you have in life, right? That your bottle of wine is now, that's at 90 some years old to feel not bitter at all, but to get over that bitterness and be completely happy with who you are and what you have in the world and the life God has given you. That's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful. So back to the story now of Purim. What did Mordechai say to Esther? We said that Adar is supposed to be happy month, and the real happiness is, wiping out a Amalek, or stopping the crush you had, getting rid of the virus inside of a person. We go back to the story of Purim. The Jews, there's a decree from Haman to kill the Jews. The decree is signed on Passover to take place 11 months later. Imagine now if there was a decree signed in America to destroy all the Jews, right? AIPAC would lobby the government, right? We would have rings around Central Park holding hands and singing. We'd have all the multicultural people in America supporting us. There'd be a huge protest, marches on these, there'd be Facebook pages. There'd be a huge political effort to save the Jews if that happened today. And there was 11 months fused before we had to leave the country for where we had to go to. That's what happened in Shushan back then. Shushan was a huge capital. It was a metropolis. So they were lobbying the government, and everyone was doing things. And Mordechai says, wait a second, guys, I have a better idea. My niece is the queen. We'll just tell her she's the queen. We'll tell her to go and lobby for us and take care of Achashverosh. So he says to Esther, this, the Jews are out here, the Facebook page, we're going to be killed in 12 months. What's going on? What does Esther say back? She says, not right now. What does Mordechai say back to her? He doesn't tell her, pretty please, or beg her. He says, Esther, this is your moment. This is the moment you've been waiting for. You're in the king's palace. You don't need to do what we do outside. Don't join our Facebook page. Don't lobby the government. Don't make a walk around Central Park. Instead, just go talk to the king. This is your moment. Because what was Esther's destiny? Why was she unique? Why was she different than everyone else? Where did Esther come from? So you got to see where Esther came from and where Amalek came from, this evil nation. So Amalek was a nation of people that came from Eliphaz, who was the son of Esau and a woman named Timnah. Timnah, 6,000 years ago, was a non-Jewish queen who lived a life of royalty. She was wealthy and beautiful and had, servants. She was a queen in a beautiful kingdom. And she gave it all up because she wanted to marry somebody in Abraham's family. She wanted to marry somebody connected to the Jewish people somehow, right? And she decided she's going to marry Esau, who was like the worst guy ever. It's like, oh, you married him? Nice, good luck for you. You know what I mean? Like, oh, have fun with him, right? He wasn't a good catch. He was not a good catch. And she married him, which is a tremendous point of self-sacrifice, just in order that she should be part of Abraham's family. That self-sacrifice went down to her and to Amalek, her grandchildren. And they had that power of self-sacrifice, right? For a wrong cause, obviously, but still self-sacrifice. On the other side, where was Esther from? Esther was from the tribe, from Mordechai was from Binyamin. Binyamin was the daughter of Rachel. What did Rachel do? Rachel also had self-sacrifice. Rachel married Esau's good twin, Jacob, Yaakov. Yaakov was the catch of the century, right? Superstar, handsome, nice, did the dishes, always took you for a walk at night. He was like the greatest, nicest, most gentlemanly person ever, and she's going to marry him. And at the last minute, her father pulls a switcheroo, and she could have embarrassed her sister. And in self-sacrifice, she says no. She gives her sister the signs not to embarrass Leah, and Jacob marries Leah instead, and Rachel's left out in the cold. And she didn't have to do that. She could have not given her sister the signs, and she would have been totally fine, and instead she did. That's also self-sacrifice. So that self-sacrifice went down from Rachel to her son Binyamin, to Mordechai, to Shaul, to Mordechai, to Kish, to Esther. So Esther has that same deal. She's the only person who can fight the power of Amalek. So Mordechai says to her, Esther, don't do what we do. You don't have to be like us. Don't compare yourselves to what we're doing out here with the lobbying. Take your unique talents, your unique your unique ancestry, your unique power that God gave you, and lobby Achashverosh that way. And that's what she did. And that's why she was able to beat Amalek, because she was able to go into the king and lobby him to save the Jews. And that's the power of Purim. That's the power of Adar. That a person takes what's deep inside them, their own strength, their unique strength, not what anybody else has, and at their moment in time, and who knows when that moment is. Maybe the moment's at a Passover Seder when you're 93 years old and you share a bottle of wine, right? Maybe your moment is keeping your mouth shut when your sister-in-law says something you shouldn't say. Who knows what your moment is? Everyone's got that moment, right? Everyone's got that moment. And to one more story. That the key with these things always sound nice, right? It always sounds nice to hear these kind of stories. Oh, it's great, right? But how's it happen? So there was a boy, you know what Asperger's syndrome is? Asperger's syndrome? So my friend's a Rebbe in 8th grade class, and he has 25 kids about who are mainstream, and one kid who has Asperger's. And Asperger's is, most of the time you're intellectually there, but socially you can totally shut down at times. Totally shut down. So this boy had Asperger's, and at the end of the class, end of the season, the Rebbe calls all the students together to give a 5 or 6 minute speech in front of the class. Okay? And the first kid goes, and the first kid's like a regular kid, and prepares a very good speech and passes out. She was like putting on tefillin or something like that, but something they make up by themselves. And he goes, fine. And then the second kid goes. And now's the time for the boy with Asperger's. And the Rebbe's in the back of the class, and he invited the principal, and last year's Rebbe, it's like a big thing. It's like the last couple of days of the year, the school year's kind of over, it's summertime, but the kids get to really show off, right? So every kid's very proud, worked on what he's going to say, and this kid with Asperger's gets up, and he stands in front of the class, and he's silent. And they're waiting for him to talk, and he's silent. And the Rebbe's like, what do I do? He asks the principal, what do I do? He says, do you want to take, so he said, do you want to take a minute? So walks up, puts his arm on the kid's shoulders, sits down, the kid's like, socially feels very funny, very embarrassed, sits down, fine, another kid goes, day's over. Next day again, he says to him, do you want to give your speech? And as opposed to facing the class, maybe you'll turn around and face the blackboard, give it facing the blackboard, it'll be easier, and we'll hear it, and that'll be, no, good idea. So he says, okay, he stands up, faces the blackboard, whole class is watching, Rebbe's in the back, principal's in the back, silence, nothing, right? Okay, 2 minutes of silence, everyone feels bad, walks up, puts his arm, sits down. Everyone feels terrible, kids feel terrible, everyone feels terrible. Finally, so he sits her down, he says, okay, you tell me when you're ready, tells the kid. The next day, 4 more kids go. The next day, 4 more kids go. It's like the last day of the year. Finally, the boy stands up, he says, okay, he sees Rebbe, he says, I'm ready. They bring the principal in, last year's principal, the boy stands up. Every kid in the class now is praying for this kid to do well. Everyone's on his team, but you can't do, you can never do it for somebody else. You can give a person advice, you can encourage them, you can nudge, you can send reminders, you can do all that kind of stuff, but you can't cure someone else, you can't help someone else. It's got to come from them. So he stands up, the whole class is there, waiting, and he gives an absolutely flawless presentation on the laws of Sukkot. Flawless. The kids stand up, they're like, the principal's crying, the Rebbe's crying, the kids are clapping, they hug him at the end, he's like, I'm a football player. They tap, The key with all these things is, at some point, you can hear speeches all you want, you can hear speeches all you want. You have to say, I'm ready. I'm ready to act on it. I'm not going to worry about myself, I'm not going to worry about other people. I'm listening to my own messages. I'm going to see where I am in the world, and do what God wants me to do. Right? I say to myself, whenever you speak, I'm like, that is such a good point. Don't compare yourself to other people. I go right back out. I compare myself to other people. We all do that. So the key in this thing is, and the real happiness, the real simcha and adar, the real joy and this month is being able to look at a character trait that you had for the past 45 years, 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, and make a decision to say, enough, I'm done with that. That's no longer going to affect me. I'm beyond it. I'm ready. It's over. I'm the boss now. So with that, I wish all of you guys, I'm going to see you again after Passover. You're all welcome to come to us for Passover in Passaic, New Jersey. I thank you for coming. I hope more people, when it's sunny out, we can sit outside and talk more. And thank you very much.